The dust cloud in the distance was the first warning, but Penelope Evans had little time to react before the runaway wagon careened down the rutted street of Dalhart, Texas, her slim fingers desperately clutching the wooden sides as the world became a terrifying blur around her. It was the summer of 1879, and the merciless Texas sun beat down on the small frontier town nestled in the Texas Panhandle. Penelope had only arrived in Dalhart 3 days prior, a reluctant journey from Boston following her father's passing, leaving her with nothing but a deed to a modest property and a trunk full of impractical Eastern clothing. At 22, she was alone in a world that felt as foreign as the surface of the moon. The horses pulling the wagon had spooked at her rattlesnake, their panic escalating when the reins slipped from the elderly driver's grasp. The poor man had fallen from his seat at the first violent jerk, leaving Penelope alone as the wagon gained terrifying momentum down the town's main thoroughfare. "Hold on!" Someone shouted from the boardwalk, but holding on was becoming increasingly impossible as the wagon hit a deep rut, sending it lurching sharply to the right. Penelope felt her body become weightless, her grip failing as she was thrown from the wagon bed. Her scream died in her throat as she braced for the impact that would surely break her bones, an impact that never came. Instead, strong arms caught her mid-air, the force of her fall sending both her and her rescuer tumbling into the dusty street. They rolled once, twice, her rescuer cradling her protectively against his chest, until they came to a stop with Penelope sprawled atop a broad-shouldered man. "Are you all right, miss?" The deep voice rumbled beneath her ear where it pressed against his chest. Penelope raised her head, dust-covered and disoriented, to find herself staring into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a sun-bronzed face framed by sandy blonde hair that curled slightly beneath a well-worn Stetson that had somehow remained on his head throughout their tumble. I think so," she managed, suddenly aware of their compromising position. Heat flooded her cheeks as she scrambled to extricate herself from atop the stranger. "Easy now," he cautioned, helping her to her feet with gentle hands. "That was quite a flight you took." Standing before her was a tall cowboy, his shoulders broad beneath a faded blue shirt, leather vest dusty from their encounter with the ground. His face was clean-shaven but weathered from the elements, laugh lines crinkling at the corners of those remarkable eyes. He couldn't have been more than 28, but there was a seasoned quality to him that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "Thank you for catching me, mister." Penelope brushed futilely at her now ruined traveling dress. "Steele." "Adam Steele," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Ranch foreman over at the Diamondback spread." "Miss Penelope Evans," she replied with as much dignity as she could muster, acutely aware of the gathering crowd of onlookers. "I'm in your debt, Mr. Steele." Adam's eyes did a quick assessment, noting the quality of her clothing despite its current state. "You're not from around here." "Boston," she confirmed, wincing as she put weight on her ankle. "I've only just arrived." Down the street, the runaway wagon had finally come to a stop against a watering trough, the horses snorting and stamping nervously. A group of men were already calming the animals and checking the wagon for damage. "You're hurt," Adam observed, noticing her pained expression. "Let me help you to the doctor." "It's nothing serious," Penelope protested, though the throbbing in her ankle suggested otherwise. Pride made her reluctant to appear any more helpless than she already had. "Just a slight twist." Adam's skeptical expression made it clear he didn't believe her. "Doc Morgan's office is just down the street, I insist." Before she could object further, a matronly woman pushed through the crowd. "Land's sakes, child, that was the most frightful thing I've ever witnessed. You could have been killed, Mrs." Abernathy, Adam greeted the woman with a respectful nod. Miss Evans here has injured her ankle. I was just suggesting a visit to the doctor. Absolutely right, Mrs. Abernathy agreed, clucking sympathetically. I'll accompany you both. Can't have a young lady unescorted, even for medical attention. Relief flooded Penelope, grateful for the woman's intervention that solved the propriety dilemma. Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy. That's very kind. With the older woman's blessing, Adam offered his arm for support. When Penelope took a single painful step, he frowned. This won't do. Before she could protest, he swept her into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Mortification heated Penelope's face. Mr. Steele. This is entirely unnecessary. It's the quickest way to the doctor, he replied matter-of-factly, already striding down the boardwalk with Mrs. Abernathy hurrying alongside, keeping up a steady stream of chatter that prevented any further argument from Penelope. Doctor. Morgan's examination confirmed a mild sprain, nothing broken. After wrapping her ankle tightly and recommending rest for at least 2 days, the physician stepped out to speak with Adam, leaving Penelope with Mrs. Abernathy. You're fortunate Adam was in town today, the older woman said, adjusting Penelope's skirts more modestly over the examination table. He's only here once a week or so for supplies, he seems. Penelope searched for an appropriate word, capable. Mrs. Abernathy's eyes twinkled. That he is. One of the finest young men in the county. Not married either, she added with the subtlety of a charging buffalo. Penelope chose to ignore the implication. I must find transportation to my property. It's about 3 miles outside of town, according to the deed. 3 miles. Which property might that be? The old Evans homestead. My father's cousin left it to him years ago, though he never visited. When father passed this spring, it became mine. Mrs. Abernathy's expression shifted to one of surprise. The Evans place. Why, that borders the Diamondback Ranch where Adam works. Before Penelope could respond, Adam returned with Dr. Morgan. 2 days of rest, the doctor repeated. That ankle needs time to heal properly. I appreciate your concern, doctor, but I must reach my property today. I've arrangements with the stage-coach line for my trunks to be delivered tomorrow. Adam crossed his arms, a gesture Penelope was quickly learning signaled stubborn determination. Your property can wait. You need rest. Mr. Steele, while I appreciate your assistance today, my affairs are not your concern. Penelope's tone was polite but firm. The Evans place, Mrs. Abernathy interjected smoothly, addressing Adam. That's where she's headed. Understanding dawned in Adam's eyes. Old Tom Evans' place. That's been empty for years. My father's cousin, Penelope confirmed. The property is mine now. Adam ran a hand through his hair, displacing his hat slightly. Miss Evans, that cabin's been abandoned for nearly 5 years. It won't be in any condition for you to stay there tonight. Nevertheless, it's my home now, and I intend to make it habitable. Penelope gingerly tested her weight on her injured ankle and winced. You can barely stand, Adam pointed out bluntly. Mrs. Abernathy touched Penelope's arm gently. Dear, I'd offer you lodging, but my house is full with my daughter's family visiting from San Antonio. Dr. Morgan cleared his throat. The hotel has rooms available. It would be the sensible choice for a few days. Penelope calculated the rapidly dwindling funds in her reticule. The stagecoach journey had been more expensive than anticipated, and she had counted on living at the homestead immediately. I'm sure I can manage at my own property. Adam shook his head, a decision clearly made. I'm headed back to the Diamondback. I'll take you to your place, assess what needs fixing, and then you can decide if it's suitable for overnight. That's very kind, but it's settled, Mrs. Abernathy declared with the authority of a woman accustomed to organizing community affairs. Adam will see you safely to your property, and if it's not habitable, you'll take a room at the hotel. I'll speak with Mrs. Henderson about a special weekly rate. Outmaneuvered and honestly too exhausted to fight further, Penelope relented. Very well, thank you. An hour later, Penelope found herself seated beside Adam on the bench of his wagon, her few immediate possessions stowed in the back alongside supplies he'd purchased in town. The wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, nothing like the rickety conveyance that had nearly been her doom earlier. They traveled in silence for the first mile, Penelope acutely aware of the man beside her. His hands were strong and confident on the reins, his profile striking against the vast Texas landscape. "What brought you from Boston to Dalhart?" he finally asked, breaking the silence. "It's quite a change." Penelope hesitated, then decided the basic truth was simplest. Necessity. "My father was a professor at Harvard. When he died, I discovered his finances were not as sound as I'd believed. The family home was heavily mortgaged. This property in Texas was my only remaining asset." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Many come west for fresh starts." "Is that what brought you here, Mr. Steele?" A smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "Born here. My father worked the Diamondback since before I could walk. Taught me everything about cattle, horses, and surviving in this country." "And your mother," his expression sobered, "lost her to fever when I was 12. Pa followed 5 years back thrown from a horse while checking fence lines." "I'm sorry," Penelope said softly, recognizing the familiar shadow of grief. Adam shrugged, but she noticed the tightness around his eyes. "Life out here is often hard and sometimes short. Makes a man appreciate the good days when they come." They crested a small rise, and Adam pulled the wagon to a halt. "There it is, the Evans place." Penelope followed his gaze to a small cabin nestled against a stand of cottonwood trees. A creek glinted in the late afternoon sun nearby, and the land stretched away in gentle rolls that were greener than she had expected for Texas in summer. "It's lovely," she breathed, surprised by the immediate sense of rightness she felt looking at her new home. Adam's chuckle held no mockery, only gentle amusement. "The setting is pretty enough, but let's see the cabin itself before you decide." As they approached, Penelope's optimism faltered. The cabin was sturdy in its basic construction, but years of abandonment showed in the sagging porch, missing roof shingles, and windows clouded with dust and cobwebs. Adam helped her down from the wagon, his hand strong at her waist. "Stay here while I check for unwelcome occupants. Snakes and such like abandoned buildings." Penelope nodded, suddenly grateful for his expertise. The thought of confronting a rattlesnake on her own was terrifying. Adam returned 10 minutes later, looking thoughtful. "Structure's sound. Roof needs work but isn't leaking yet. Found signs of raccoons, but they're gone now. Main concern is dust, cobwebs, and the stove pipe needs cleaning before you can safely light a fire." "Can it be made habitable tonight?" Penelope asked, determined. Adam hesitated. "It would take hours of work, and even then it wouldn't be comfortable." "I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Steele. Never suggested you were, but with that ankle you'd be more hindrance than help today. And there's supplies you'll need: fresh bedding, food, tools. The pump needs priming too." Penelope bit her lip, frustration warring with practicality. "Perhaps the hotel for tonight would be wise," she conceded reluctantly. "I have another suggestion," Adam said, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign he was working through a problem. "The foreman's cabin at the Diamondback is just over that ridge, less than a mile. Mr. Carson, the ranch owner, keeps a room ready for visitors. You could stay there tonight, and I'll help you start setting this place to rights tomorrow." Penelope stiffened. "Stay at a ranch with men?" Adam's eyes crinkled with amusement. Mrs. Carson would take issue with that description. "The ranch house has proper guest accommodations. The owner's wife would serve as your chaperone." "I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition. The Carsons are good people. Harold Carson has owned the Diamondback for 20 years. His wife Lillian runs the house like a general. Not a man on the ranch would dare step out of line." Penelope weighed her options. The hotel in town would strain her limited funds. The cabin clearly needed significant work before it would be comfortable. And the thought of returning to town only to make the journey again tomorrow seemed exhausting. "If you're certain Mrs. Carson wouldn't mind. She'll be delighted for female company. The Carsons have 3 sons, all grown and working the ranch. Lillian complains constantly about being surrounded by men tracking mud into her clean house." Decision made, Penelope nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Steele. I accept your kind offer." The Carson ranch house was impressive by any standard, but particularly so for the Texas frontier. 2 stories of solid construction with a wide veranda wrapping around 3 sides. It spoke of prosperity and permanence. Lillian Carson proved to be exactly as Adam had described, a formidable woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She welcomed Penelope warmly after hearing her story. "Of course you'll stay with us until your place is suitable," she declared, already shepherding Penelope toward the staircase. "Adam, tell Rodriguez to fetch hot water for Miss Evans' bath. She must be exhausted and filthy from that dreadful experience." 2 hours later, bathed and dressed in a borrowed nightgown that was slightly too large, Penelope sat at the Carsons' dinner table feeling more relaxed than she had in months. The meal was simple but delicious: roast beef, potatoes, fresh biscuits, and vegetables from Mrs. Carson's garden. Harold Carson was a bear of a man with a booming laugh who seemed genuinely pleased to have her at his table. "Tom Evans was a good neighbor," he reminisced. "Kept to himself mostly, but always willing to help during roundup. Shame he passed with no family nearby." "My father was his only living relative," Penelope explained. "They corresponded occasionally, but father never mentioned much about him." "Tough old coot," Mr. Carson said fondly. "Built that cabin himself when he first claimed the land. Good water there, decent grazing. Small spread, but a person could make a living if they worked hard." Penelope took a sip of water, considering. "My plan is to sell the property eventually. I'm not suited to ranch life." Adam, who had cleaned up for dinner and looked startlingly handsome in a fresh shirt, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Land values are increasing," Mr. Carson nodded. "Railroads pushing this way. Might get a decent price in a year or 2 if you can hold out." "A year or 2?" Penelope couldn't hide her dismay. Her funds wouldn't last more than a few months. Mrs. Carson patted her hand. "There are ways for a respectable young woman to earn income in Dalhart. The school needs a teacher. Or there's seamstress work. I noticed your dress has fine stitching." "I taught literature at a ladies' seminary in Boston before father's illness," Penelope admitted. "And yes, I'm proficient with needle and thread. See, you have options." Mrs. Carson's tone was bracingly practical. "But first, let's get that homestead in order. Adam, you'll help." "Already promised," he confirmed. "I'll bring some of the boys tomorrow. We can have the basic repairs done in a day or 2. "That's extremely generous," Penelope said, "but I can't afford to pay for labor. Neighborly help doesn't come with a bill, Miss Evans," Mr. Carson interrupted. "That's how we survive out here. Your cousin would have done the same for any of us." That night, lying in a comfortable bed in the Carsons' guest room, Penelope stared at the unfamiliar ceiling and contemplated how dramatically her life had changed in just one day. From terror on a runaway wagon to being tossed through the air into the arms of a handsome cowboy, from homelessness to unexpected hospitality, it was almost too much to process. Adam Steele's face appeared in her mind's eye. His remarkable blue eyes, the strength in his arms when he caught her, the quiet competence with which he handled every situation. He was unlike any man she had known in Boston. "Don't be ridiculous," she whispered to herself in the darkness. He was simply being kind to a stranger in need. But even as she drifted to sleep, Penelope couldn't dismiss the flutter in her stomach when she recalled the warmth of his hands at her waist, or the curious feeling that fate had perhaps arranged her dramatic arrival in Dalhart, Texas. Morning came with golden light streaming through lace curtains, and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from below. Penelope dressed carefully in the one remaining clean outfit from her traveling case, a practical navy blue skirt and white shirtwaist. Her ankle felt significantly better, though still tender. Breakfast at the Carson Ranch was a lively affair. In addition to Mr. and Mrs. Carson, their 3 sons James, Thomas, and William joined them, along with Adam and 2 other ranch hands. The table conversation flowed easily between cattle prices, weather predictions, and gentle teasing. "Adam says you flew through the air like a circus performer, Miss Evans," James, the eldest Carson son, remarked with a grin. "Must have been quite a sight." Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Hardly my most dignified moment. Lucky Adam was there to catch you," Thomas added. "He's got good reflexes from breaking mustangs." Adam seemed unaffected by the ribbing. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not Henderson," William snorted, too worried about his fancy suit. "William, Mrs. Carson admonished, "Mr. Henderson is a respectable businessman." "Doesn't make him any less of a dandy," William muttered into his coffee cup. After breakfast, Adam outlined his plan. "I'll take Miss Evans to her property. James and Diego will follow with lumber and tools. Thomas, you bring the wagon with the supplies Mrs. Carson has gathered." Mrs. Carson had indeed been busy, collecting spare household items from around the ranch: dishes, linens, pots and pans, even a rocking chair that had been gathering dust in an upstairs room. "Just loaners until you can get your own things," she insisted when Penelope tried to protest. By mid-morning, Penelope found herself once again seated beside Adam in his wagon, bumping along the road to her property. The day was clear and beautiful, the late summer heat tempered by a gentle breeze. "The Carsons are extraordinarily generous," she observed, still overwhelmed by their kindness. Adam nodded. "Good people. They understand frontier life requires cooperation. No one survives out here alone. Is that why you've been so helpful to me? Frontier cooperation." He glanced at her, a slight smile playing at his lips. "That, and I couldn't very well leave a lady in distress after she fell into my arms from the sky." "I did not fall from the sky," Penelope protested, laughing despite herself. "Merely from a wagon." "Like an angel falling to earth," he teased, then quickly grew more serious. "Truth is, Miss Evans, your cousin's land being empty these past years has been a worry. We've had trouble with rustlers using abandoned properties as stopover points. Having you live there solves that problem." "So your assistance is purely practical," Penelope said, telling herself the slight disappointment she felt was ridiculous. Adam was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "I didn't say that." Before she could ask what he meant, they arrived at the cabin. In daylight, Penelope could better assess her new home. The setting was genuinely beautiful, with the creek providing a constant gentle music and cottonwood trees offering dappled shade. The cabin itself was sturdily built of squared logs with a stone foundation and chimney. "Your cousin chose well," Adam commented, helping her down from the wagon. Good water, natural windbreak from those trees elevated enough to avoid flooding. Penelope walked slowly around the exterior, trying to envision the place cleaned up and repaired. It's smaller than I expected. 2 rooms plus the lean-to kitchen, typical for a bachelor's homestead. Adam pointed to a small outbuilding. That's the privy, and there's a good barn over there, though it needs some roof work. James and Diego arrived shortly after, their wagon loaded with lumber, tools, and other building supplies. Thomas followed with the household items Mrs. Carson had gathered. By noon, the cabin had transformed from abandoned shack to work in progress, with men moving purposefully between tasks. Penelope insisted on helping despite her ankle, organizing the kitchen area and sweeping decades of dust from corners. She discovered the cabin had simple built-in furniture, a bed frame in the small bedroom, shelves along one wall of the main room, a sturdy table with 2 benches. "Your cousin was a decent carpenter," Adam commented, watching her run a hand along the smoothly finished shelf. "Made all this himself." "I wish I had known him," Penelope said softly. "He created a real home here." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You're his blood. This place was meant to come to you." By late afternoon, the transformation was remarkable. The men had repaired the roof, fixed the sagging porch, replaced broken window panes, and cleared the chimney. Diego, who apparently served as the ranch cook, helped Penelope set up the kitchen area, showing her how to operate the cast iron stove. "You will need firewood," he told her in accented English. "I show you where the axe is kept, but perhaps for now the men will chop some before we leave." "Thank you, Diego. I'm afraid my experience with axes is rather limited." The cook grinned. "In Texas, you learn quick or you freeze when winter comes." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, James approached Penelope where she stood on the porch, surveying their work. "We should head back to the ranch," he said. "But Adam says he'll stay to finish a few things. Thomas will come back tomorrow to help with the barn roof." "I can't thank you enough," Penelope said sincerely. "Your family's kindness is overwhelming." James shrugged, embarrassed by her gratitude. "Neighbors help neighbors out here. You do the same." After the others departed, Penelope found herself alone with Adam for the first time since their initial journey to the cabin. He was outside, splitting logs for her woodpile with powerful, efficient strokes. She watched from the doorway, mesmerized by the rhythm of his movement and the play of muscles beneath his shirt. When he paused to wipe sweat from his brow, he caught her watching. Rather than tease her, he simply smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his eyes. "The cabin should be comfortable tonight," he said, setting another log on the chopping block. "The stove draws well, and I've left a fire laid in the main fireplace. Just strike a match to it when the evening cools." "I don't know how to repay your kindness," Penelope said, stepping onto the porch. Adam split the log with a single stroke before answering. "No repayment necessary, though I wouldn't object to a cup of coffee if you're making some." Penelope smiled. "That I can manage." They shared coffee on the porch as twilight settled over the land, painting the sky in spectacular oranges and purples. The vastness of the Texas landscape spread before them, so different from the crowded streets of Boston. "It's beautiful," Penelope murmured, cradling her cup between her palms. "Takes some getting used to," Adam agreed, "but once the land gets in your blood, no other place feels quite right. I can see why people fall in love with it." Adam studied her profile in the fading light. Most Easterners struggle with the isolation, the harshness. They see only what's lacking compared to city life. "And you think that's how I'll feel?" Penelope turned to meet his gaze. "I think you're stronger than you appear, Miss Evans. There's something in your eyes, determination, maybe. You might surprise yourself." The simple observation, delivered without flattery, touched Penelope deeply. "My father always said I was stubborn to a fault." Adam's chuckle was low and warm. "Stubbornness is a survival trait out here." As darkness fell, Adam reluctantly stood. "I should get back to the ranch. Mr. Carson will need a report on what else your place requires." "Of course." Penelope rose as well, suddenly nervous about spending her first night alone in the cabin. Adam must have read her expression. "The door has a good strong bar. Keep it in place overnight. I'll be back in the morning with more supplies, and your trunks should arrive from town tomorrow." "I'll be fine," she assured him, squaring her shoulders. "I may be from Boston, but I'm not completely helpless." His smile was gentle. "No, Miss Evans, you certainly are not." After Adam left, Penelope moved through the cabin, lighting the lamps Mrs. Carson had provided. The space felt different with him gone, larger and quieter, the silence broken only by the creek's murmur and occasional night sounds from outside. She lit the fire he had laid in the main room's small fireplace, then inspected her new domain more thoroughly. The main room was roughly 15 feet square, with the fireplace centered on one wall. Besides the built-in shelves and table, there was now the rocking chair from Mrs. Carson, a small side table, and a braided rug that brightened the plank floor. The bedroom was tiny, just large enough for the built-in bed frame, now topped with a straw tick mattress and linens from the ranch. A small window looked out toward the creek, and pegs along one wall provided the only storage for clothing. The lean-to kitchen contained the cast-iron stove, a dry sink with a pump that Adam had repaired, and shelves for dishes and food storage. Basic, but functional. "I can make this work," Penelope told herself firmly, "at least until I can sell the property." But as she prepared for bed, moving through the unfamiliar rituals of country life, banking the fire, checking the door bar, washing in a basin of water she'd heated on the stove, Penelope found herself thinking less about selling and more about what it would take to truly live here. And if she was honest with herself, her thoughts kept returning to a pair of blue eyes and strong hands that had caught her when she fell. The next few days established a pattern. Each morning, Adam or one of the Carson boys would ride over to check on her and help with ongoing repairs to the property. Her trunks arrived from town, allowing her to unpack her belongings and add personal touches to the cabin. Mrs. Carson visited, bringing preserves, dried herbs, and practical advice about housekeeping in the wilderness. On the fourth day, Adam arrived with a surprise, a small bay mare with a white blaze down her face. "You need transportation," he explained, helping Penelope into the simple side saddle he'd brought. "Sunny here is gentle but sure-footed. She'll get you to town and back safely." "I can't accept a horse," Penelope protested, even as she admired the sweet-faced mare. "It's too valuable a gift." "She's on loan from the Diamondback," Adam clarified. "Mr. Carson insists, says it's dangerous for you to be out here with no way to reach town quickly if needed." Penelope stroked the horse's neck, touched by the consideration. "Please thank him for me. I'll take good care of her." "I thought I might show you the boundaries of your property today," Adam suggested. "Now that you're more settled in the cabin." They rode side by side across the rolling landscape, Adam pointing out landmarks and explaining the natural features of her land. The property was larger than she'd imagined, nearly 100 acres, including good grazing land, the creek, and a small stand of timber. "Your cousin ran about 40 head of cattle," Adam explained as they paused on a ridge overlooking a lush meadow. "Not a big operation, but enough to support himself comfortably." Penelope tried to envision cattle grazing below, tried to imagine herself as a rancher. The idea was both terrifying and oddly appealing. I know nothing about raising cattle, she admitted. Adam shrugged, adjusting his hat against the sun. You can learn or hire help or sell like you planned. What would you do if you were me? He considered the question seriously, his eyes scanning the horizon. Depends on what you want from life, I suppose. This land can provide a good living if you're willing to work hard, but it's not an easy life, especially for a woman alone. The implication that she might not be alone hung in the air between them, unspoken but present. They rode back to the cabin in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they dismounted, Adam helped her down, his hands lingering slightly at her waist. "Thank you for the tour," Penelope said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, "and for everything else you've done." Adam's eyes held hers. "My pleasure, Miss Evans. I think, after all this, you might call me Penelope." A slow smile spread across his face. "Penelope, then, and I'm Adam." That night, alone in her cabin, Penelope wrote in her journal, trying to make sense of her tumultuous feelings. In less than a week, her entire world had changed. The Boston life she'd known, with its rigid social rules, literary discussions, and predictable rhythms, seemed like a distant memory. Here, each day brought new challenges and unexpected joys. And then there was Adam Steele, a man unlike any she'd known before. Direct, capable, kind without condescension. She'd caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her heart beat faster, but he maintained a respectful distance that both frustrated and relieved her. The next morning, Penelope rode Sonny into Dalhart. She needed supplies and wanted to introduce herself properly to the townspeople. Mrs. Carson had suggested she speak with the mayor about the teaching position at the school. Dalhart was busier than she'd expected for a frontier town, with freight wagons moving goods from the newly established rail line 20 miles south. The main street boasted several substantial buildings, a hotel, general store, bank, and even a small restaurant advertising home cooking. At the general store, Penelope was examining fabric when a well-dressed man approached her. "Miss Evans, I presume?" His smile revealed perfect teeth beneath a neatly trimmed mustache. "I'm Bradford Henderson, owner of the bank and land office." News travels fast in small towns, and your arrival has been quite the topic of conversation. "Mr. Henderson." Penelope nodded politely, recalling William Carson's dismissive comment about the man being a dandy. His suit was indeed more fashionable than practical for the frontier. "I understand you've inherited the Evans property," he continued smoothly. "If you're considering selling, I'd be very interested in making an offer. The land has significant potential with the railroad expansion." "I'm still settling in," Penelope replied carefully. "I haven't made any decisions about the property's future." Henderson's smile remained, but his eyes sharpened. "Of course, but a young lady such as yourself, accustomed to Eastern comforts, might find frontier life challenging. I could offer a very fair price, enough for you to return to Boston in style." The assumption that she would naturally prefer to return east irritated Penelope. "Thank you for your interest, Mr. Henderson, but as I said, I'm not ready to make any decisions." Of course. He stepped back, tipping his hat. "The offer remains open. Meanwhile, please join me for dinner at the hotel this evening. As a newcomer, you should meet the leading citizens of Dalhart." Penelope hesitated. The invitation was perfectly proper, and establishing connections in town was important. "That's very kind. What time?" 7 o'clock. I'll reserve the best table." With another tip of his hat, Henderson departed, leaving Penelope with mixed feelings about the encounter. Later, as she completed her shopping, Penelope met several other townspeople, including Mrs. Abernathy, who greeted her like an old friend. "I've been meaning to ride out and check on you," the older woman said. "I'm so pleased the Carsons took you under their wing. Salt of the earth, that family." "They've been incredibly kind," Penelope agreed. "And Mr. Steele has been invaluable in helping repair the cabin." Mrs. Abernathy's eyes twinkled. "Has he now?" "Adam Steele is quite the catch, you know. Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him, but he's never shown particular interest." Penelope felt her cheeks warm. "He's simply being neighborly. MMM." Mrs. Abernathy's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise. "I saw you're riding Sunny. That was my late husband's mare. The Carsons bought her when he passed. Sweet-natured animal." "She's a lovely horse," Penelope said, grateful for the change of subject. "I'm still becoming accustomed to riding, but she's very patient with me." "Well, if you need anything at all, my home is always open to you. And do join us for church on Sunday. Best way to meet everyone." By the time Penelope headed back to her cabin, the sun was lowering in the sky. She'd accomplished her errands and spoken with Mayor Collins about the teaching position. The school needed someone immediately, and despite her lack of formal certification, her education and previous teaching experience at the seminary made her the most qualified candidate in the area. "Term starts in 3 weeks," the mayor had told her. "Salary's modest $30 a month, but it's steady income." Penelope had accepted provisionally, pending a meeting with the school board the following week. The prospect of teaching again pleased her. It was familiar work that she enjoyed and did well. As she approached her cabin, Penelope was surprised to see Adam's horse tethered outside. Adam himself was on the porch, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Adam," she greeted him, dismounting with growing confidence. "I didn't expect you today." He stepped forward to help with the horse. "Just wanted to check that everything was still working properly. The pump sometimes sticks in dry weather." It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. The pump had worked flawlessly since he repaired it. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered, untying her packages from the saddle. "I've just been to town for supplies." "That would be nice." He took the packages from her, following her into the cabin. As Penelope prepared coffee, she told him about her day in town, the teaching position, meeting various townspeople, the supplies she'd purchased. Adam listened attentively, offering occasional comments or explanations about the people she'd encountered. "I also met Mr. Henderson," she added, setting a steaming cup before him at the table. "He seems quite eager to purchase my property." Adam's expression tightened slightly. "Henderson's been buying up land all along the projected railroad route. Pays fair prices, but he's always looking for a bargain. He invited me to dinner at the hotel this evening, to meet the leading citizens," he said. Something flickered in Adam's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or concern. "I see. Is there any reason I shouldn't go?" Penelope asked directly. Adam took a sip of coffee before answering. "Henderson is respected in town, wealthy, ambitious. There's nothing improper about dining with him." "But," Penelope prompted, sensing his reservation, "but his interest in you may not be purely business." Adam met her gaze steadily. "He's a widower, 38, looking to remarry. A cultured Eastern lady would be quite a prize in his eyes." Penelope hadn't considered that angle. "I have no interest in becoming Mrs. Henderson, regardless of his position in town." The relief that crossed Adam's face was unmistakable, though he quickly masked it. "Just so you know what you might be walking into. Thank you for the warning." Penelope hesitated, then added impulsively, "Would you care to join us?" The invitation mentioned meeting leading citizens, and as the Diamondback foreman, you certainly qualify. Adam's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Henderson wouldn't thank you for including me. We have different visions for the future of this county." Nevertheless, the invitation is mine to extend, Penelope said with growing determination. And I would very much appreciate your company. A slow smile spread across Adam's face, warming his blue eyes. In that case, Miss Evans, I'd be honored to escort you to dinner. When Penelope and Adam entered the hotel dining room that evening, Bradford Henderson's expression was a study in conflicting emotions: pleasure at seeing Penelope, confusion at her unexpected escort, and poorly concealed annoyance at Adam's presence. Miss Evans, how delightful, Henderson recovered quickly, rising from the table where he sat with two other men. And Mr. Steele, this is a surprise. I hope you don't mind, Penelope said pleasantly. Mr. Steele has been instrumental in helping me settle into my property. I thought it only fitting he join us, as you mentioned meeting Dalhart's leading citizens. Henderson's smile tightened. Of course. Please join us. You know Judge Patterson and Dr. Morgan, I believe. The dinner proceeded with superficial pleasantries, though Penelope noted the undercurrent of tension between Adam and Henderson. The banker repeatedly steered conversation toward Penelope's property and the difficulties a woman alone would face managing it. The sensible course would be to sell while land values are rising, Henderson suggested, signaling for more wine. Miss Evans has talents better suited to civilization than frontier hardship. Miss Evans has shown remarkable adaptability, Adam countered calmly. And her property has significant potential, properly managed. Judge Patterson, a shrewd-eyed older man with impressive side whiskers, studied them both with barely concealed amusement. The lady can make her own decisions, gentlemen. Though I'll note that Henderson rarely offers to buy land unless he sees substantial profit in it. Henderson's laugh held little humor. Business is business, Judge, but my interest in Miss Evans extends beyond mere property. The possessive undertone made Penelope bristle. While I appreciate your interest, Mr. Henderson, I've accepted a position teaching at the Dalhart School. I intend to remain on my property for the foreseeable future. Teaching? My dear Miss Evans, surely that's unnecessary. I enjoy teaching, Penelope interrupted firmly. And I value my independence. The conversation shifted to safer topics after that, but Penelope remained aware of Henderson's calculating gaze throughout the meal. When they finally took their leave, the banker insisted on walking her to the door. Your cowboy escort seems quite protective, Henderson observed quietly, just out of Adam's hearing. I wonder if his interest is purely neighborly. Mr. Steele has been a good friend, Penelope replied neutrally. Henderson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Friends are important in a new place. But a woman in your position should consider advantageous connections. I could offer you security, position in the community, comforts that a ranch hand could never provide. The presumption left Penelope momentarily speechless. Mr. Henderson, while I appreciate your candor, we've only just met. I'm not considering marriage to anyone at present. Of course. He stepped back smoothly. I simply wanted my intentions clear. I'm a patient man, Miss Evans. Adam was silent during their ride back to her cabin, the moonlight illuminating the trail clearly enough that they could travel side by side. Finally, Penelope could bear the tension no longer. Henderson offered more than a land deal, she said quietly. He made his personal interest quite clear after you stepped away. Adam's hand tightened on the reins. I suspected as much. I declined, of course. Penelope studied his profile in the moonlight. He seems to think you have similar interests. Adam turned to meet her gaze, his expression unreadable. And do I? Penelope's heart fluttered in her chest. I don't know. Do you? The trail narrowed, forcing them to ride single file, postponing his answer. By the time they reached her cabin, the moment had passed, leaving an expectant tension in the air. Adam helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. "Henderson was right about one thing," he said softly. "My interest isn't purely neighborly." Penelope's breath caught. "Adam, but I'm not like Henderson, pushing for what I want regardless of your wishes." He stepped back slightly, though his eyes never left hers. "You've barely had time to adjust to your new life. The last thing you need is another complication." "Perhaps I should decide what complications I do or don't need," Penelope said, surprising herself with her boldness. A smile tugged at Adam's lips. "Fair enough." He took her hand, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. "Penelope Evans, I admire you more with each passing day. Your courage, your determination, your quick mind. I'd like to court you properly if you're willing." Joy bubbled up inside her. "I'd like that very much." His smile broadened into a grin that transformed his face. "Then I'll call on you tomorrow with your permission." "Permission granted," she replied, unable to suppress her own smile. Adam raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her fingers. "Until tomorrow, then." As autumn settled over the Texas panhandle, Penelope's life fell into new rhythms. Weekdays were devoted to teaching at the small schoolhouse in Dalhart, where 12 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old challenged and rewarded her in equal measure. Weekends were for maintaining her home, visiting with the Carsons or Mrs. Abernathy, and increasingly spending time with Adam. Their courtship progressed with a comfortable mix of traditional propriety and frontier practicality. Adam called regularly, always respectful, but with growing affection that Penelope returned wholeheartedly. They rode together exploring the countryside, shared meals with friends, attended church and community gatherings. Bradford Henderson continued his pursuit, though with diminishing enthusiasm as Penelope's relationship with Adam became common knowledge. His interest in her property remained keen, however, and his offers gradually increased in value. "He's determined," Adam observed one Sunday afternoon as they sat on Penelope's porch after returning from church. "That last offer was actually quite generous." Penelope sipped her tea thoughtfully. "It was, but I find myself increasingly reluctant to sell." "Oh." Adam raised an eyebrow, trying and failing to look merely curious rather than pleased. "I've grown attached to this place," she admitted. "The cabin feels like home now. The land, the creek, even the work, it suits me better than I ever would have expected." "You've taken to frontier life remarkably well," Adam agreed. "Your garden thrived this summer. You're a natural with Sonny, and from what I hear, the children at school adore you." "Not all of them," Penelope laughed. "Billy Matthews still tests my patience daily." Billy Matthews tests everyone's patience, his own mother included. They lapsed into comfortable silence, watching a hawk circle lazily over the distant meadow. After a moment, Adam spoke again, his tone more serious. "Winter's coming. First snow often falls before Thanksgiving out here. Mrs. Carson has been tutoring me on winter preparations. We've been canning vegetables and preserving fruit. The root cellar is well stocked, and I've laid in plenty of firewood." Penelope smiled at his concerned expression. "I'll be fine, Adam. I know you will." He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. "But I worry about you out here alone when the weather turns. Blizzards can be dangerous. Are you suggesting I return to town for the winter?" "No." Adam took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting you consider not being alone." Penelope's heart skipped. "Adam," he turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Penelope Evans, I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment you flew through the air into my arms. These past months have only deepened that feeling. I want to build a life with you here on your land, or elsewhere if you prefer." Joy bloomed in Penelope's chest, warm and bright. Are you asking me to marry you, Adam Steele? I am. His blue eyes were steady on hers, vulnerable yet certain. I don't have much to offer beyond my hands, my heart, and my promise to cherish you all our days. But if that's enough, it's everything, Penelope interrupted, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. Yes, Adam. Yes, I'll marry you. His face lit with such joy that Penelope's heart seemed too full to contain her happiness. Adam pulled her gently into his arms, one hand cradling her face with infinite tenderness. "May I kiss you?" he whispered. "Please," she answered, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was sweet and reverent, a promise sealed between them. When they parted, Adam rested his forehead against hers, his smile brighter than the Texas sun. "Mrs. Carson will be insufferably pleased with herself," he murmured. "She's been dropping hints since the day you arrived." Penelope laughed softly. "Mrs. Abernathy, too." Apparently everyone saw this coming but us. Not everyone. Adam's expression sobered slightly. "Henderson won't be thrilled. He's still hoping to acquire your land." "Let him hope," Penelope said firmly. "This is our home now." The word "our" sent a fresh wave of happiness through both of them, sealed with another kiss that held the promise of their future together. They married 2 weeks before Christmas in the small church in Dalhart. The ceremony was simple but joyful, attended by the entire Carson family, Mrs. Abernathy, Penelope's students and their parents, and most of the hands from the Diamondback. Even Bradford Henderson made an appearance, offering stilted congratulations before departing early. "Reckon he's still sore about losing both you and the land," Mrs. Carson observed at the reception held in the hotel dining room. "Men like Henderson aren't used to being denied what they want." "He'll recover," Mr. Carson replied, refilling his wife's cup with punch. "Already courting that widow from Amarillo, I hear." Adam, handsome in a new suit purchased for the occasion, seemed unable to stop smiling as he kept Penelope close at his side. "Mrs. Steele," he murmured repeatedly, as if testing the sound of her new name. "It has a nice ring to it," Penelope agreed, leaning into his embrace. Their wedding night was spent in their cabin, which Adam and the Carson boys had secretly improved while Penelope was teaching during the weeks before the wedding. The roof had been completely replaced, glass windows installed in place of oiled paper, proper cabinets built in the kitchen, and a new larger bed frame constructed for their bedroom. "I can't believe you managed all this without my noticing," Penelope marveled as Adam carried her across the threshold. "You're observant, but you've been busy with school and wedding preparations," Adam replied, setting her gently on her feet. "And I may have enlisted Mrs. Abernathy to keep you occupied on Saturdays. Conspirators, all of you." Penelope turned slowly, taking in the transformed space. A fire blazed in the hearth, candles glowed on surfaces throughout the cabin, and fresh evergreen boughs decorated the mantel. "It's beautiful, Adam." "Not half as beautiful as you." He drew her into his arms, all humor fading into something deeper. "I love you, Penelope Steele, and I love you, Adam Steele." She reached up to touch his face, heart overflowing. "More than I ever thought possible." Their kiss deepened, passion replacing tenderness as they began their life together. Winter in the Texas Panhandle proved as challenging as Adam had warned. Blizzards howled across the plains, sometimes confining them to the cabin for days at a time. But where Penelope might once have found such isolation frightening, with Adam beside her, these snowbound days became treasured memories, reading aloud by the fire, teaching each other favorite games, sharing stories of their childhoods, and discovering the deep joy of physical love. When spring finally arrived, they began in earnest the work of developing their small ranch. Adam resigned from his position at the Diamondback, though he maintained close ties with the Carsons. Harold Carson helped them acquire a small herd to start their operation, and Adam's knowledge of cattle ranching proved invaluable. Penelope continued teaching, riding to town each morning and returning each afternoon. Her garden expanded, and she began experimenting with growing crops suited to the Texas soil. The work was hard but satisfying, their partnership in all things making even the most difficult tasks manageable. Summer brought its own challenges: drought that threatened the grass, a brush fire that Adam and neighboring ranchers fought to contain before it reached anyone's buildings, the constant work of maintaining fences and caring for livestock. But it also brought joy: warm evenings on the porch watching fireflies dance over the meadow, swimming in the deepest part of the creek, community gatherings where Adam's quiet pride in his wife was evident to all. And finally, in late August, the discovery that their family would grow in the new year. "A baby," Adam breathed when Penelope shared her suspicion, confirmed by Dr. Morgan. His hand trembled slightly as he placed it over her still flat stomach. "Our child, due in March, Dr. Morgan thinks." Penelope covered his hand with her own. "Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to describe it. Adam gathered her close, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I could have this: a wife I adore, a home that's truly ours, and now a child. You've given me everything, Penelope." "We've built it together," she corrected gently. "And we'll continue building, for ourselves and for our children." As her pregnancy progressed, Penelope reluctantly reduced her teaching schedule, finally taking a full leave of absence when winter arrived. The school board, pleased with her work, promised to hold her position if she wished to return after the baby's birth. The months passed, with preparations: Adam adding a small nursery off their bedroom, Penelope sewing tiny garments, Mrs. Carson and Mrs. Abernathy providing advice and hand-me-down baby items from their own families. Bradford Henderson made one final attempt to purchase their land in January, offering a sum that would have seemed unimaginable when Penelope first arrived in Texas. "The railroad's definitely coming through just south of your property," he explained, standing stiffly in their main room while Penelope served coffee. "This is a business decision, nothing more. You could set yourselves up very comfortably elsewhere." Adam and Penelope exchanged a glance, their decision already made. "Thank you, but no," Adam replied firmly. "This is our home. We're not interested in selling at any price." Henderson's frustration was evident, but he left without further argument. Later, Penelope found Adam standing on their porch, staring out at the land that had become so precious to them both. "Did we make the right decision?" she asked, joining him. Adam wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his other hand resting on her swollen belly where their child kicked vigorously. "I think we did. This land has good water, good grazing. With the railroad nearby but not cutting through our property, we'll have easier access to markets without the disruption of trains crossing our range. And it's home," Penelope added softly. "That's the most important part." Adam kissed her temple. "Where you and our children are, that's home to me." Their son, Thomas Harold Steele, arrived on a clear March morning in 1880, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. The birth was difficult but uncomplicated, with Mrs. Carson serving as midwife while Adam paced anxiously outside until the baby's first cry rang out. "He's perfect," Adam whispered when Mrs. Carson finally allowed him in to see his wife and newborn son. Tears shone in his eyes as he gently touched the baby's tiny fingers. "Absolutely perfect." "He needs a strong name," Penelope said, exhausted but radiant. "Thomas for my father, and Harold for Mr. Carson, who has been like a father to you." Adam nodded, too overcome for words. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Penelope and one hand cradling his son's head, completing the circle of their family. In the years that followed, the Steele ranch flourished. Their herd grew, their crops thrived, and their family expanded to include a daughter, Lillian Rose, born 2 years after Thomas, and finally another son, James William, 3 years later. Penelope eventually returned to teaching part-time as the children grew, finding fulfillment in both her family and her profession. Adam's skills as a rancher became widely respected in the county, and he was eventually elected to the town council, where his practical wisdom and fairness made him a valued voice in community decisions. Bradford Henderson moved to Denver in 1883, selling his bank to a consortium that included Harold Carson's eldest son. The railroad came through as predicted, bringing growth to Dalhart and prosperity to the surrounding ranches, including the Steele property. On the 10th anniversary of her arrival in Texas, Penelope stood on their porch watching Adam teaching 7-year-old Thomas to rope a practice post. Lillian, at 5, supervised critically from the fence rail, while 3-year-old James toddled after a butterfly in the yard. The cabin had expanded over the years, a proper kitchen added, the main room enlarged, a covered porch wrapping around 2 sides, but its heart remained the same. Penelope thought back to that terrifying moment when she'd been thrown from the runaway wagon, certain she was about to be seriously injured or killed. Instead, she'd landed in Adam's arms and, ultimately, in a life more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined in Boston. Adam looked up from his lesson, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, still capable of making her heart skip after all these years, was warm with understanding, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Adam pulled Penelope into his arms as they stood together on the porch beneath a vast canopy of stars. "Any regrets?" he asked softly, his breath warm against her hair. Penelope leaned back to look up at the man who had caught her in more ways than one. "Not a single one. You. Only that I didn't meet you sooner," Adam replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Though I suppose if that wagon hadn't run away, we might never have met at all." "I think we would have," Penelope said with conviction. "Some things are meant to be, regardless of how they begin." Adam's kiss was as tender as their first, yet deepened by years of shared love and life. "You're right, as usual," he murmured against her lips. "We were always meant to find each other." And as they stood together under the Texas stars, surrounded by the home and family they had built together, both knew with absolute certainty that falling, whether from a runaway wagon or into love, had led them exactly where they were supposed to be.